All right, so the December meeting was yesterday. All the trustees were present except for Trustee Curry and Trustee Carrion. And so they discussed CPMs 1.1 to 1.3 and also the community listening meeting results. So CPMs 1.1 to 1.3 are related to the student survey that students take in the fall that's about campus climate and culture. So the first one, 1.1, is related to campus climate. The district said that they're progressing in this goal. So there was a slight 2% decrease from last year's scores, but they did say that they're within 10 percentage points of their target of next year, which is 68%. And then 1.2 is related to campus safety. So the district said that they were on track with this goal. There was an increase of 8 percentage points from last year. They're very close to their goal for next year. And then 1.3 is related to sense of belonging. And they said that they were progressing in this goal. There was a decrease from last year, but they're within 10 points of their target. So some of the things that they discussed was the importance of advisory time and like practices that aren't academic and including that, incorporating that both into classroom time, but also advisory time. They're going to be staffing 40 to 50 more security officers across campuses. They also reduced the student counselor ratio from 400 to 1 to 270 to 1. And then they are planning to launch the School Counselor Excellence Initiative next year, which is similar to TEI, but it would just be for counselors. And so the impact of positive student responses obviously impact academics, attendance, retention, and it's one of our constraints that the district should keep in mind as they're pursuing academic goals. Trustee Mishke wanted to know if neutral responses were included in the positive responses. So no, but they also aren't included in the negative responses either. They're separated out and are truly neutral. And he also wanted a breakdown of how favorable or unfavorable the response was. So if it was a positive response, was that what percentage of students were saying they strongly agree with this as opposed to like just agree to see like how actually extreme their responses were. Same thing for unfavorable. And then how many elementary schools have full-time officers? Currently 95. In order to fulfill the state mandate, they need about 110 more officers, but all of the middle and high schools have at least one officer. Some of the high schools have two. And then what other safety mechanisms are in schools? So they have metal detectors, access card readers at doors, cameras. They're going to be installing fencing around all the schools. They do audits and door sweeps regularly. They're going to install window film on the first floor windows. They're going to 3D map all the campuses. So DPD has like a really specific layout of what each campus looks like. They also have a silent alarm system for staff to use. It's an app on staff members' phones. And then they also received a grant to provide restraint training for all of staff. So those are some of the mechanisms. Trustee Foreman wanted to know when the survey was administered, October. She also wanted to know why the language of the survey questions changed. So they did mention, and they actually provided in the report some examples of how the questions changed. It was just to provide clarity and remove some language that might be too complex, especially for elementary school students. So just to make it kind of easier for students to understand what they're responding to. And then how does the district use feedback from the student-led safety team? So each campus has a safety team that's comprised of 3 to 4 students and also a sponsor. And those campuses meet with the principal monthly to share their feedback. They also meet with the district admin once a semester. It's not so much to share feedback, but for the district admin to provide resources for those teams. She did say she wanted to know the top safety concerns from those teams from each school. What was the police vacancy rate? So it was 3% in February, but now it's fully staffed. There are 126 total officers. And she did say she wanted to know how many choice schools versus comprehensive schools have those advisory periods built into their master schedule. Trustee White wanted to know if the panorama survey can be customized. So no, it can't be. It's because it's a national survey, so they can't customize it because they want to be able to use it to compare the results across the state, nation, etc. And then what's the ratio for mental health clinicians? So there's one at every high school, and then there's split between 2 middle schools. So one clinician would serve 2 middle schools or 3 elementary schools. And then is the district fully equipped with metal detectors and wands. Yes, they are. Trustee Weinberg wanted to know if clinicians conduct pathway advising. So no, they only conduct mental health support. And then what is the effect of advisory period? So they said when teachers and instructors are intentionally providing that support for culture and climate during advisory or even just classroom time, it has shown to produce positive results, but there needs to be intentionality behind it. And then who receives the professional development for advisory? So there is professional development specifically for advisory time, and that's just determined by each campus. And then Trustee Turner wanted to know if there are vacancies in mental health clinicians. No, they're not. They're fully staffed. And then Trustee Mackey wanted to know if the schools with advisory periods have better survey results. They did. He also wanted to know how these results compare to other districts across the state and across the country. And then were there trends among schools that experienced declines? So they said that the schools with the lowest results consistently had changes in leadership. And then they also weren't practicing those SEL exercises consistently. Or so those would be like gratitude journals, morning circles. They weren't doing that on a consistent basis. And then what has led to the increase in positive results around safety? So they just said it coordinated efforts to increase the audits that are being done and also the other safety mechanisms. He did say that it might be helpful to explore creating student-led teams for culture and climate, similar to the safety teams, since that seems to be successful. And then does that 270-to-1 ratio only include certified counselors? So yes. So there are more staff members on campuses like college access providers, mental health clinicians that support students, but they're not including that 270-to-1. So the actual support is kind of greater that number would say, basically. And then superintendent's report was on community listening meeting results. So these were the meetings that were held in October and November. There were 16 total. There were around 650 total participants in the group sessions that were conducted in person. And then there were a couple on Zoom, so virtual sessions. And then 600 people about completed the online survey. What's linked here is an appendix that has the same report, but it's a little bit more specific when it comes to the categories. But this is important because the board is going to use these results to guide their first draft of the 5-year goals and constraints that they'll be voting on at the end of the year. And so this was the board's first time seeing this data, so they didn't get into it too much. They said that there would be time to like internalize this data, but this is the breakdown for the group sessions for the priorities. So that was the first question. What are your priorities? What do you think all students should know how to do at the end of elementary, middle school, high school, etc. The N here is not the number of people, but it's just the number of mentions. So basically, if you were there, you had a chart paper that you could write down all the priorities. And then the last 2 columns are of those priorities that you wrote down, what do you think are the top 2? So you had to kind of select the biggest priorities. And then the appendix actually has more specifics on what these subcategories mean. So for example, it shows like physical health can mean, nutrition, sex education, mental health support. So it kind of has a breakdown on more specifics. So definitely check that out and kind of have to use it as a guide as you look at this data. This is the same breakdown of priorities, but for the survey results. So it's listed here. And then they were asked, what in pursuing these goals and priorities, what should the district preserve? So this guides kind of the constraints. Again, they have a breakdown of subcategories and what that kind of actually means. For example, like resources and support. So student could be like more mental health resources for students, could be an example of what that looks like. This is the group session data, and then this is the survey result data. They didn't go too much into actually the data itself. This is just kind of like a preliminary look at it. And then what should the district avoid in pursuing these goals? So again, guiding the constraints. This is the group data. This is the survey data. Looking for it. Yeah. So trustee Weinberg just wanted to see the combined results of the group sessions and survey responses because they were separated for this meeting. And then trustee Foreman wanted to know the breakdown of participants by district on the survey responses. So they didn't actually require people to provide their home addresses or the schools that they, live closest to or support. But some people did like self-identify. So they said that they would kind of comb through that survey data to see if they could break down what was provided. And then trustee Johnson asked if there would be a second round of community listening meetings. So they're going to discuss the draft in mid-December, and they said that they could potentially hold more meetings in the spring once that draft's created to share it with the public and then receive feedback on it. And then trustee Mackey just said it seems like there's alignment between the group sessions and survey responses and like how they what priorities they named and what they should preserve and avoid. So that was the December meeting.